Welcome, everybody, to tonight's forecasting Zoom call, Mars retrograde Leo Cancer. This is Media Monk. And I just want to do a little housekeeping and announce that we have gotten back into the binders business on our EA course. Um, we are offering all the binders material shipped. We've had some feedback from students and other participants over the years about getting those materials for highlighting purposes, et cetera, have the paperwork right in your hand. So we're going to go back and ship those course materials out to you if you choose that option on our EA course webpage. Lots of information in that binder. It's organized in 3 rings. It's very colorful, easy to access all the information. We have gotten out of the DVD business, but you can get those binder materials shipped with the complete access to over 500 hours of video, audios, and webinars that we've produced over the last 25 years here at EAN. And we are the home of evolutionary astrology. So whether you're interested in joining that segment 1 course, or if you're an existing student and would like to upgrade to segment 2 relationship astrology, we've also upgraded that particular segment with all the health and wellness information that used to be the 3rd segment of our EA course. That's all contained in segment 2. We call it relationship astrology et al. So again, binder materials are available for that purchase. Go to the EA course page, and welcome to tonight's Pay It Forward Zoom call. And I'll turn it over to Kim.
All right. Thank
Oh,
you,
were we
Laura.
recording that? Yeah, okay, we got it recorded. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, gonna say you're in charge of hitting record, dear.
It looks like I did good. Yeah, thank you. Welcome, everyone.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar on Mars retrograde in Leo Cancer. You can see the dates on your screen, December 6th through February 23rd, from 6 degrees Leo to 8 degrees Cancer. And here is our housekeeping slide on the major links on our website with, again, Leroy talking about the fact that we've had with course materials requests from online associates to be able to get these binder materials that you see a picture of right here. And so new products on the page if anybody wants to follow through and have those binders to go with your streaming videos when you study. And then I also did a webinar for a Canadian astrological group about the 4 planetary ingresses that we have going on this decade that are really going to create a lot of change on planet Earth. Stay tuned as we see how all of that unfolds. But again, something else that I have on our website as well. And so here is I say synodic, I think that's how you pronounce it. Here's the synodic cycle of Sun Mars from conjunction to conjunction. You can see where Mars's pre-shadow is. We're just getting ready for it to turn stationary retrograde in a couple of days here. So dates and degrees for you as we move forward. I'll show this to you again. Mars, when it goes retrograde, slows down enough in its 2-year cycle that it spends a lot of time in just 1 or 2 signs. This particular retrograde cycle in both Cancer and Leo, you see dates when it's in each of these signs on your screen. Its longest sign transits come during its retrograde cycle, and between Cancer and Leo's transits, Mars is in those 2 signs almost 10.5 months. That's a long time for Mars to be in just 2 signs of the zodiac. It turns out to be about 35% of this particular cycle that it's in just these 2 signs. And so a little bit of Mars astronomy for you just real quick. I'm going to go through things somewhat fast. You'll have the recordings, of course, to look over as you want to. Mars happens to be retrograde for 79 days this cycle. And on the bottom of your screen, its retrograde cycle goes forward approximately 1 to 2 signs every retrograde cycle. And you can see where I've got them listed on your screen for you, reversing. Last time we had Mars retrograde in Leo was 2009, 2010. If you want to take a little bit of time and reflect upon that. We had elected Barack Obama president, and we were moving through the what was it called? Affordable Health Care Act. Whew, let's see what happens to that this retrograde cycle in Leo Cancer. A visual for you on the Mars retrograde cycle from our perspective here at Earth, on Earth. And Mars archetype, active polarity, cardinal modality, fire element. It's our instinctive desire to act, become. All the fire signs have a sense of special destiny to them. That's that fire element known as spirit. Well, with Aries, the first archetype, which is what Mars is also, it's unknown. We have this sense, I got to do, I got to be, I got to become, but we don't know what it is. And so Mars needs all that freedom to pursue it. And it can get very frustrated when it runs up against something that doesn't let it have as much freedom as it wants. It's called a Libra polarity, by the way. And so it's also then the archetype of what EA calls the leading edge of our conscious desire nature, that instinct to become. And in evolutionary astrology, we have two main desires, the dual desire nature of our souls, which is represented by Pluto specifically, the separating desires, anything and everything you can think of that you want to manifest and create. And of course, the returning desires, which are to know universal source. That dual desire nature of our soul via Pluto works kind of unconscious. Mars is how it's made conscious. That's why it is that leading edge of our desires. It's also the process of self-discovery. We're always in a continual state of becoming, moment by moment, day by day, year by year. And that energy moving outward, that active polarity of Mars, it learns by action, reaction. Action, reaction. It puts it out there, sees what comes back to then decide how to put it out there maybe a little differently, and etc., etc. It also is one of the main archetypes of our sexual impulse and how we act upon it. The active polarities are known as more masculine energy or energy moving outward. And so wherever Mars is transiting, it's always the leading edge of wherever our soul's evolution is taking place. And it's also the leading edge of our sexual evolution. In general, when Mars goes retrograde, we can have a buildup of sexual energy that needs release. And included in that, as we will see in this particular retrograde transit, when it goes back into Cancer, which is naturally square Aries, there can be a lot of emotional buildup or even emotional sexual buildup that needs to have its own type of release from time to time. Now, why retrogrades? Again, we live here on Earth, and if we watch the skies, those planets appear to slow down and reverse themselves to go direct again. The main meaning of retrograde planets is it's an opportunity to break free from all of the consensus conditioning factors of whatever that planetary archetype is. And when we break free, it allows us the opportunity to return to what's more natural law for each of us on an individual basis. If you happen to have been born with Mars retrograde, here's looking at you, Media Monk. You can have a temporary harmony during Mars retrograde when those of us born with Mars direct are feeling the frustrations of Mars retrograde. And by the way, I just want to point out that as we are recording this on December 4th, if you happen to have some beautiful, clear evening skies, we have our monthly Moon Venus conjunction going on as Venus is rising higher and higher in the heavens. And Venus it will be at its highest altitude and greatest brightness January 10th, just about a month away if you care to be watching that in the evening skies. We got clouds here right now, so we don't quite get to look at it. So Mars retrograde, the transiting Mars, it's always related back to its natal archetype by sign, house, and aspect. This is whether Mars is direct or retrograde, but especially if you look at where transiting Mars retrograde is going to be specifically in your chart, you still relate it back to your own natal position of Mars. Here one more time. Any Mars retrograde cycle, it's throwing off our old desires. Been there, done that. They're no longer serving our soul, and it's a natural time to release. One of the other major themes with Mars retrograde is because Mars is so much wanting to be, do, impulsive actions. Mars retrograde is when we have to learn considered actions. Slow down and think about it, process through it before you act upon it. This is my personal opinion, I have a tendency to say this is usually the toughest retrograde cycle to go through. We can get frustrations with Mercury retrograde, but Mars is the one that can tend to upset us even more because we have that natural anger and frustration of things not moving forward the way we want them to. So here is Mars' stationary retrograde chart. And what I'd like to point out to you is we have the Mercury interior conjunction to the Sun the day before Mars turns retrograde, December 6th. And so we are just coming off of the highlights of what are we to be understanding about ourselves on some of the deepest intuitive levels. And so as Mars turns stationary retrograde, it can be a time period to get some real ahas on what's not moving forward in our life right now, of whatever goals and desires we have, where are things kind of at a little bit of a butt at it. And so we have potential to have insight here. But we also have the T-square going on with the Jupiter oppositions to Mercury and Mercury's squares to Saturn. So there can still, with just that square nature, be a little bit of volatility, as I'm going to call that Mars word there. Keep your aggression in check. And so I also like to say that, Mars turning retrograde, Mars turning direct, sometimes can act like Mercury. Unexpected things happen. You have to take the time to really slow down, drive carefully, move through things, check it twice. Bought a plane ticket for Leroy and I, and we bought it on the wrong date according to the friends we're going to see. So here I am, Mars retrograde, having to see if I can get the ticket changed. And if not, go to plan B. All of that happened during Mercury retrograde as well. And so, again, just Mars in general with that feistiness. And then that slowing down, it stands still for 3 days. You really got to kind of be careful, pace yourself in the world. And then what we also have happening, and I got this date wrong. Hold on, I got to make my little note on this to correct myself. The day after Mars retrograde, Neptune's going to go direct, stationary direct at 27 degrees Pisces, finishing up 5 months. During this week that we are in the midst of and heading into the weekend, will honesty and integrity come through? I always like to say that Mars Neptune as a planetary pair is congruency in action, honesty in action. And if not, it can go into the lies and the deceits and all of the Neptunian um, bubbles of not being in touch with reality and Mars trying to, be the con artist getting away with something. So we've got a little bit of energy going on right now again in this week and moving into the weekend. Pace yourself, stay as calm as you can. All right. Saying that for myself as well. So I want to just jump into this aspect right off the bat. We have 3 Mars oppositions to Pluto during its retrograde cycle. And I'm also going to point something else out for you as well. Mars is waxing to Jupiter, Uranus, Eris, Chiron, Neptune, Saturn, and Pluto. Mars makes aspects to all of the outer planets 3 times during this retrograde cycle. It is a highly active Mars retrograde. And so here are its 3 oppositions to Pluto. Remember the USA presidential election? I think that, again, they're such a unique planetary pair, and to be opposite each other, this can be the most challenging aspect of Mars's retrograde cycle. We knew going into November 15th with Mars opposite Pluto that half the country would turn out elated by the election results and half of the country would turn out, in this case, depressed by the election results. And that's exactly what happened. And so Mars is really getting a lot of information from Pluto right now of what works for us in our world and what doesn't work for us on an individual level, on a collective level. And what we're, really coming up to is the opposition aspect can bring conflicts within ourselves, between our own ego and soul. I want this, but it's not working out. And so we have to then have that reflection about objectivity with limits. Okay? Oppositions are intending to be objective, and the limits are going to come from Pluto and Aquarius, objectivity about limits. We are really looking at, with these 3 aspects, or 3 oppositions, excuse me, what we can achieve and what we cannot, what we can create and what we cannot. If you look at it politically, Republicans have the presidency in the US, and they have the House and the Senate. They have a trifecta. So they have all the power. So what can Democrats do and what can Democrats not do? Stay tuned. We will watch how this unfolds during the next few months as we have a shift in administrations. And so again, I was already talking about the election here, okay? But it also showed us that control with that first opposition that the right-wing media has over the masses. And I spoke about this in Mercury retrograde. I've spoken about this on a public EA Zoom call post-election. Highly recommend that you read this article if you haven't. 2/3 of the country get their information from right-wing conservative media. And they don't look at it that way. They just look at it as the news. That's what that first opposition represented, as we've got a little bit of time to reflect back on that. The next 2 oppositions, Mars, Pluto are going to be in fire and air, which are active polarities. We'll start to see some rebellion show up. We are moving towards them right now. If you followed the news in the last couple of days, where I think it's the president of South Korea implemented martial law, and the Parliament, Congress, whatever, said no, siree. So there's some stuff to watch. France just had a no confidence vote of their prime minister, and so there's no functioning government right now. We can see this kind of stuff going on in multiple countries all over the world with these Mars Pluto oppositions. And who's going to be aggressive? Who's going to want to fight some war? You know, Russia and Syria squashing the oppositions to Syrian government. We will see it all over the place. And what we will also have happening here in this time period is Donald Trump coming into office. And as his revenge desires, we'll briefly look at his chart in a moment. You know, is he going to implement things that really make the economy worse instead of better? This all gets stirred up with Mars Pluto. But we also have a potential for new leaderships to arise, especially with Pluto in Aquarius now. That is one of the archetypes of Aquarius, who's got that leading edge, who can show us a way to go. I think Bill Clinton was a sun in Aquarius. He was one of those kind of charismatic characters back in the day. And so there will be those type of individuals coming up and out through these Mars Pluto oppositions. We can call them with Leo Aquarius, those charismatic personalities. And they learn how to speak in such a way that we can understand and hear them. Stay tuned. We'll see who that's going to be all over the world, here in the US over the next, few months, as again, we have this changing of the guard with our rulerships in our country. Of course, we can also have the good old false prophets, the two-faced promises with, Jupiter and Gemini. I'm going to say this and do that, split and divide, power grabs. We can have all those distortions with Mars and Pluto, including, again, aggressive power grabs, or worst comes to worst, somebody outright deciding they're going to go to war and get their share because everybody else is. Stay tuned. So here's some of the psychology of Mars retrograde in Leo. It is a time period to review how we are going to take charge of our life and our sense of destiny. With the fire element of Leo, we can many times, I know I want this, I know I can do this. And, when Mars goes retrograde in Leo, why isn't it working out? So stay tuned, I'll address this, but it's about how to creatively actualize our sense of self. That's Leo. What's unique to us that we have to share with the world. Now, one of the things that can happen is we want everybody to acknowledge us for our specialness or sense of self-importance. And when Mars turns retrograde, we have to find it from within. We'll find those butt edits of those that aren't going to pay any attention to us or notice it. And so when we have that kind of defeatism or letdown, we have to, again, know how to go in and self-love and acknowledge our own self. Mars retrograde in Leo. Personal will is strong when Mars is in Leo. And again, we want to do that resistance. But those Pluto oppositions, stronger forces of power that says we're not the center of the universe. And again, this is what we can and cannot do. Now, we can also have the opposite of this, we can have no sense of personal power. If you are a practicing astrologer, you could have run across those of the Pluto and Leo generation, Pluto the soul, or people who have Pluto in the fifth house, regardless of signs, or perhaps a few planets in Leo or the fifth house, and they just don't seem to have any of that will to them. Then that can mean they're here to develop it. And so if we are experiencing a lack of will through Mars retrograde in Leo, there's going to be a buildup of pressure from Mars that says, I've got to be me. I've got to speak up. I've got to do this. I've got to figure out how to be creative and find my own sense of personal power. Love lessons come up for review with Mars retrograde in Leo. And if we are a little bit on that self-inflated ego side, we will have some lessons of learning how to better love another. It can go to extremes of those great affairs or love triangles to either falsely maintain a sense of importance or get our needs met somehow, or sometimes, to really just bring an issue to a head. May or may not be the end of the relationship, but there's going to be something going on in regards to giving and receiving love if we have those little messy triangles going on. If we're on the underinflated ego side and we're in relationship, we may have to learn how to stand up for ourselves. We may have to express our desire, Mars, for a better or more equal giving and receiving in that relationships. Relationship. One. Oh, yes. Either way, we've got to learn how to, again, deeply love ourselves first in healthy ways, not attention outer ways, but inner ways. Because the better we love ourselves, the more we authentically show up, and the more our relationships become more authentic in our world. Now, one of the other things that can happen with the archetype of Leo is what EA will call arrested development. If Cancer coming before Leo, okay, we have childhood wounding that was not healed, or parents that didn't recognize us for who we uniquely are. We could have had some arrest in our development, and we can have what we call child adults running around, or adult children, either way you want to say it, running around trying to get the attention that they never got from mommy and daddy. And why won't you notice me? And so Mars retrograde in Leo is here again. It's an opportunity to love ourselves, but it's also an opportunity to learn how to parent ourselves. So this can be true of Mars retrograde in Leo, and it can also be true of Mars retrograde in Cancer. Now, let me pop into the Aquarius polarity during the time Mars is retrograde in Leo. This is where we gotta go to that polarity archetype, Aquarius, and learn how to be objective with ourselves, to objectify ourselves, what we really need to be happy. Now, here's my 4 words that I've been saying with Pluto and Aquarius, but they're going to be there in this Mars retrograde as well. Detach, objectify, liberate, innovate. Whatever situations are blowing up with Mars retrograde or coming to a head, how do you detach? How do you step back? How do you look at it as broadly as possible? Where is change being asked? And when you then change, how do you move forward in different ways? That's the Aquarian process. And that's what Mars retrograde in Leo is pointing to. So it also then says, when we objectify ourselves one more time, validate ourselves from within versus always wanting to be acknowledged out there. It's almost like you can do that Aquarian detachment and you don't need it out there because you have it here. So when we do that, then it allows us to have that power in natural ways, and kind of like even the Mars Pluto opposition, it can allow us to step into some natural leadership roles in our personal world, however it works best for us to do it on a natural, healthy way. And it's also then recognizing, because Leo is known as subjectivity, Aquarius is known as objectivity. Both can be distorted, both can be naturally expressed, okay? But what we will recognize with that Aquarius polarity is where the ultimate source of creativity is, which is universal source. And there's my phrase, what would you have me do, source? How would you have me act, source? So we're not just coming from, I want this. We're actually saying, all right, how do I participate in society? And what talents do I have that will best be of use for society, with society? And then we also can learn to acknowledge that in others. We can learn to acknowledge creativity in others, because if we're fulfilling ourselves from within, acknowledging, validating ourselves from within, then we're not threatened by out there. And we can acknowledge it out there. We can support creativity of others out there. So, we also will be reviewing what types of communities and social groups we actually relate to. When Mars is retrograde in Leo, pointing towards Aquarius, is a natural time period to review our collective participation in groups. So, how are you evolving? How is it changing for you? You know, many on the Democratic or progressive side are just exhausted from 8 years of Donald Trump and taking that break from media, taking that break from being involved in a group. Haven't heard anything about our women's march with women's march with our pussy hats. I still have mine. Haven't heard anything on that. So it's kind of almost that Mars retrograde detachment going, I have to regroup and I have to decide how I'm going to go out there and participate socially. And what gets included with that is how Aquarius relates to friends. It's an air element, it's like-mindedness. So it's possible that there's a re-evaluation of friendships going on, with or without politics. We could be having new friends show up. We could have friendships that, ran their course, or there could be something that's just in process of changing in regards to that. So I have always said in EA that polarity, Leo and Aquarius, Aquarius is friends, Leo is lovers. Friends become lovers. When love lessons are done, they go back to friendship and natural law. We don't necessarily have natural law, or patriarchal distortions bring in the Scorpio polarities of, obsessive compulsive, the Taurus polarity of, possessiveness. So here's something that I've said a long, long time to clients. The natural way that we want to initiate intimate love relationships is this way. We start with companionship, activity more important than person. This is where we find out whether or not we have similar beliefs and values. Are we compatible enough? Then we move into friendship. Here, person becomes more important than the activity. We learn that giving and receiving and how we can compromise within that friendship. My joke is, Leroy learned astrology. I learned sports. That's the foundation that we fall back on when we then move into intimacy. So it goes in that order: companionship, friendship, intimacy. Because the best relationships in the world, the soulmate relationships, they're still going to have karma. So when they can fall back on friendship, companionship, they move through the karma. And of course, in EA, we've always said the exchange of sexual fluids, Mars, is an exchange of karma as well. So with this Mars retrograde in Leo, with this Aquarius polarity, all of this can be reviewed. And even if you're in an intimate relationship already, how can you review companionship with your partner? How can you review your friendship with your partner? And how do you want to review intimacy in whatever way it's building up for you through this retrograde? So let's look at Mars then moving retrograde back into Cancer, where it will spend a little more time than its retrograde in Leo. 6 degrees retrograde in Leo, and what is it, 13 or 14 degrees retrograde in Cancer? 13. Emotional outbursts, frustration, and anger signifies the need to internalize self-love, emotional self-reliance, recognizing we are the only ones who can make ourselves happy regardless of outer circumstances and events. And it can also represent, those emotional outbursts can represent the need to create a more equal giving and receiving. If we're feeling used or abused, the pressure can build up. And one of the most common things that we have with Cancer, which is a water sign, which is the emotions, which are the emotional cycles of withdrawal and animation. And through Mars retrograde in Cancer, this is not only true with intimate relationships or relationship with ourselves. It can include family and work and anything else. Everybody's got these emotional cycles heightened through Mars retrograde in this sign. Honor these cycles. The withdrawal cycle is when something triggers us and we go inward. I gotta figure it out. Something's going on. And usually it can happen on a somewhat subconscious level. So we need that inner time to go, oh, why do I feel this way? Why am I angry? Why am I depressed? Why am I triggered over this situation with this person? And what that purpose of that withdrawal cycle is to understand what triggered us, why it triggered us, and how we work to heal that wound, that trigger, and how we work to find a new homeostasis, a new center, a new emotional state of loving ourselves. Once we do that, we flip over into the animation cycle. We are that sense of me, I'm okay. I can go back out there into that world. And so now we want to go talk about it. We want to discuss it with our partner. We want to emote. We want to share ourselves in some way. And we want to then express those new levels of giving and sharing that we are learning through these cycles. And these Cancer emotional cycles of withdrawal and animation are not predictable. They just happen. So the best you can do is honor that with anybody else you're in relationship with. And I always like to say, I didn't get words on this, but this is popping in, so I'll share this. One of the most important things about the archetype of Cancer when it's in intimacy with another person is that non-sexual touching and sharing is just as important as a sexual side of it. So if you have somebody who has fourth house Pluto, Cancer, Soul, or lots of Cancer or fourth house in their chart, this is important. And I like to say when they're going through that withdrawal cycle and they're triggered, you're not wanting to push yourself on them. I like to say, can you just come up and give them a nice little squeeze on the shoulder? Can you give them just a little back rub? Non-sexual touching. Maybe just sit down beside them, close, but not pushing. And it can help release whatever that pressure point, trouble point is. And it's like, oh, that's what's going on with me. They remember something from childhood, or they remember just some emotional situation from the first person they ever fell in love with, and something gets released and go, oh, that's it. So this will then be active for all of us when Mars goes retrograde into Cancer. We might have those emotional triggers that show up that we want to honor the other person's process, however it's taking place. Mars retrograde in Cancer will be reviewing and evolving our self-image. Who am I? How am I different? What's my unique identity? And it's been conditioned our whole life by parents, culture, environment, everything. So Mars retrograde, we can be wanting to throw off old self-image, old parts of ourself we identify, goes, that's just not me anymore. Don't want to be that way. And then we can, mature emotionally as we evolve that self-image. Family patterns are going to be up for review, the one we were born into and the families we choose to create. If we can understand old familial patterns, we can then have some idea how we Mars action want to change those familial patterns. And of course, the Cancer Capricorn axis deals with the anima animus. And so that can come up and we can have things that need to be rebalanced in that way. Females can be balancing their inner male, males can be balancing their inner females. We can have all of the gender issues and the gender switching issues that come up. They have their own source of emotional conditionings and difficulties. And so Mars can be triggering all of that. It can be, triggering our sense of femininity. It can be triggering our sense of aggressiveness. How do we balance all that? How do we honor that? And how do we honor that in others? If you've been following the news, what are there? I can't remember the number. 23 or 27 states have banned hormonal therapy for transgender children under 18. Talk about the split and divide in this country. I don't know that I see it ending very fast for a while. Stay tuned. As I say, time will tell. But again, Mars retrograde in Cancer is going to stir this kind of stuff up. And if you feel that emotional pressure building up, how best can you take a deep breath, count to 10, count to 100 instead of just emotionally blowing up at someone? I have to take my own medicine as well with regards to this. I love this saying. I have this as a poster Back in the day when I was in college, you could buy those posters with your pretty pictures and your sayings. I have some yet. This is one of them. Nothing is as strong as true gentleness, and nothing is as gentle as true strength. To me, this fits with Mars in Cancer, and it might be something we want to practice through Mars retrograde in Cancer, pointing towards that Capricorn polarity. So, that polarity says I must take responsibility for my own circumstances in life. I don't get to Mars, get angry and blame the world, or get angry and blame someone else. If it's in my world, I've co-created it. So how do I take the next step in maturation, accept responsibility for it, parent myself if I have to, and go, okay, how do I grow up? How do I handle the circumstances in my world, whatever stage of life I'm at? Am I young trying to create a career, or am I in process of retiring? Am I in process of having to be an adult taking care of an elderly parent? So we're going to have Cancer Capricorn. We're going to have familial situations showing up in our world somehow, some way. How do we take responsibility for whatever our role is in those familial situations? And we also, with Capricorn, want to review whatever our roles are in society. And again, it can be somewhat related to our chronological ages. Are we a, elder statesperson and active in that area? Or are we young and we're, more interested in starting a family than maybe being active in some social role? But regardless of whatever our roles in society are, because that's what we do with Capricorn, we have opportunities with this retrograde cycle to step into more self-determination, to use that Mars will with that Capricorn polarity, to use that discipline to take charge of our life. How is that showing up for us during this retrograde cycle? So Mars relating to the conscious edge of our desires. How are we reviewing those desires around career, around money and resources, gender and equality issues, power versus powerless issues? How do we want to take the next stage of maturing in our world? And then it's a natural time period to review that sense of judgment. Capricorn is many times consensus standards of right, wrong conduct. They may not have anything to do with what EA will call natural laws and principles. Okay. It is just a societal pressuring or conditioning that says, well, this is right and this is wrong. And we're reviewing it when we have Mars retrograde, Cancer, Capricorn polarity. Standards decided by whom? How do I decide? Right standards of how do I decide standards of right, wrong conduct for me? And then how do I align my actions, Mars, in alignment as best as possible with what I perceive to be natural principles or what I perceive to be healthy, right, wrong for me? And then finally, that Cancer polarity, it is teaching us that outer security is only as good as inner security. When we look at the fact that in 2025, we are going to have Jupiter go into Cancer for a year. We're going to have Saturn go into Aries for 2.5 years. We're going to have Uranus go into Gemini for 7 years, and we're going to have Neptune go into Aries for 14 years. We got 4 planetary ingresses. I got 4 more webinars coming up. Okay. It's going to create change. And sometimes I'm just concerned that 2025 might be quite explosive. So it is important through this Mars retrograde that we really do learn how to deepen our inner security so that we can be okay with whatever is going on out there in the world. Because these 4 planetary ingresses are not going to just take place in the US. They're going to take place for every country on every continent. Sometimes it'll be okay, but a little concerned if we have some distortions of Pluto and Aquarius that we can have some explosive things happen. They can start with Mars retrograde. So deepen that inner security for yourself as best as possible. Now here is Mars retrograde opposition to the sun. Okay, this is the highlight of its retrograde opposition, highlight of its retrograde cycle. There can be an intensity of power struggles because there is going to be this T-square with Eris. It's always going to be going there, and we have Eris transiting in Aries, and we have Chiron going to catch up with it. And if we feel triggered or wounded, we can really start to lash out. You've seen some of that if you've been following the media. You can see how there have been some of the distortions in the macho male world, Mars retrograde, lambasting the phrase, your body, my choice. And then we've had the female reaction that's known as B4. Oh, I heard what it was in detail. It relates to something, I think it was Korea or Taiwan, where there's the 4 areas where women are going, no relationship, no sex, no this, no that, with men, pulling off men. So we've got that intense stuff going on with Mars opposition to Pluto, with Mars square Eris, with Eris square Pluto, with them, being in some of these animus signs of Cancer, Capricorn. So here's the highlight of the sun with this. Will this stuff explode in some way? How is it happening personally for you in your world? How are we going to get our 2 genders on the planet maybe get along with each other? Are we going to go backwards with women's equality and fairness? Are we going to stand up female to male? It might be a lot of what's going on through this Mars retrograde. We also, though, have a grand trine with the South Node moving into Virgo with Uranus in Taurus, and Uranus getting ready to go stationary direct, and with the Sun to the Mars opposition. That grand trine in Earth, it could act as a relief valve, but it could also bring about tensions with Earth, and we have some type of Earth events, volcanoes or earthquakes, as grand trine Earth relates to T-square. And it could also, being it's Earth, it's physical, it could relate to there being some type of resource events going on. you know, Trump is going to take executive control on January 20th, and he says he's going to jump right into those tariffs. How long will it take before we really see that it's not making things better for costs on an individual basis? It will make things worse. Stay tuned. There's a saying, the only thing that will serve as a check for Donald Trump is Wall Street, because stocks start going down as these tariffs come on. If he chooses to, it will create backlash on Wall Street, which might make Trump simmer down a bit. Or maybe he's just going to boast and then say, see, I changed it. I didn't even have to put the tariffs in. Who knows? We will find out. We will get to live through it. I tell people that I like to use the Michael Munchausen chart. Here's an article on it for you if you are interested. I always say July 4th charts show or inclusive versus exclusive trends with the Mercury Pluto opposition, the Mars Neptune squares, and of course the Sun Saturn squares. We go through our periods of time, including excluding, and we seem to be on an excluding trend and wave right now. Well, here's the interior conjunction with our July 4th charts, and we've got Mars over Mercury 3 times. We got it opposing Pluto 3 times. The Mars Pluto oppositions are right in the orb of influence here. And we also have Mars then squaring Chiron 3 times as we are experiencing another Chiron return for the United States. So that polarization of public opinion and public ideas and public norms and public laws and blue states and red states, it can just intensify through this Mars retrograde. The reds moving to the state of Wyoming, my neighbor, so that 80% of the state is Republican. Those moving out so that they can move to a blue state or whatever. I don't see this ending very fast. And of course, with these oppositions as well, I can really see power grabs coming in. I can really see Leroy, you're going to have to tell me whether that Department of Government Efficiency with Elon Musk and Vivek, whatever, is it dog or Dodge? I am not
It's
an
DOGE. It's just an acronym. It's not a word, honey. It's
How
Department
is
of
it
Government
pronounced?
Efficiency.
They're going to pronounce it.
I'd go Doge.
Oh. Okay. Okay, honey, you do that. I'm going to call it dog. Okay, dog. I love dogs, but
I'd go a doggy then. Just call it a doggy.
a doggy. Again, here's here an example of a few days after the, retrograde opposition, Trump comes into power, and what does Elon Musk and Trump and everybody else start doing to dismantle federal institutions? How much of it can they actually get away with? Some things they will, other things they won't be able to. Um, they will awaken the sleeping giant if they try to privatize Social Security, as they are starting to rumble about doing. Like I'm saying, we get to live through it. Donald Trump with the Mars retrograde, it's going to go over his Venus Saturn 3 times, and it is going to square his Jupiter and turn stationary, direct, exactly square his Jupiter, while he's in the middle of next spring, still having the three Jupiter and Gemini, the third hits of Jupiter and Gemini on his Gemini Sag planets. I'm looking at this Mars over his Venus Saturn, and you either love him or hate him. There's I don't know if there's anybody neutral on Donald Trump anymore. I also see this as him taking his revenge actions. Cancer can be quite protectionistic, and on a mundane level, it can be very nationalistic or, patriotic, even in its distorted ways. And so I can see him, just being in his, excuse me, emotional immaturity, narcissistic self, literally going for this revenge that he says he's going to do. I can see him initiating this kind of stuff in Mars retrograde and Cancer over these planets. Let's see how much of it he actually gets away with. This is his whole America first, lambasting, etc. There's other things going on, but for time purposes, we're just gonna let this go. I promised myself that I will touch upon Donald Trump, but he doesn't get any oxygen in my room. So let's look at these aspects close again. Here's our retrograde dates one more time, okay, as we go forward. Here's the inner planets. So Venus, Sun, Mercury only make one opposition each in this particular Mars retrograde cycle. They always have oppositions in the outer planetary retrogrades. And when they relate to Mars retrograde, it contributes to a personal awareness in how we want to move forward with our desires. They're not just Sun, but Mercury and Venus also shining a light of day, shining that opposition on. This is what I really want in my world. Well, Venus, it's pushing Mars to consider a larger perspective to any situation or desire. You can see Venus isn't going to have that opposition until next week or about a week away from this recording. And so how can we be more objective about how our actions affect others? How are we doing that review of friends or lovers, if we have that going on in our world? Reviewing our friendships with people, reviewing our lover dilemmas with people. Both of them, can be taking place for us. Venus is those values. And so Venus asks us in Aquarius, take that larger perspective on what's most important to us. How does that affect how we take action? With the Sun, again, here's the aha moments, because Sun and Mercury are going to do it in Capricorn, Cancer. There's all those inner security lessons again versus trying to control everything, and reviewing all of the emotional dynamics that drive our desires, that motivate us to action. How is that changing for us? And then a week later in January, Mercury has its opposition. And how do we communicate it with those in our world? How do we explain what's going on for us emotionally? How do we accept self-responsibility for whatever's popping up in our world? Mars makes waxing semi-squares to Jupiter. It moves into crescent phase with Jupiter, which is yin. And so here we have to review our choices on how we really want to move forward. With Jupiter and Gemini, are we willing to listen, learn something from others, or are we just trying to talk over others and impose what we want on everyone else, no matter what? Are we paying attention to the intuitive hits, Jupiter, that can be coming through for us on best actions forward? Can Mars be feeling a little bit of that motivation and pressure to do it differently than we have before? So, this is that internalization to process, ponder, intuit, and yet still crescent vase move forward. Mars has two different aspects to Saturn 3 times. 6 Saturn aspects this retrograde cycle. Here's the sobriety check. Okay. Here's the reality check, as I'm always saying, with Saturn in Pisces. Okay. So this is what I'm calling probably the most emotionally stressful aspects that we're going to have, because things are going to go from those waxing trines where things appear to be going real smooth, and then something falls apart at the sesquisquadrates or sesquisquares, as everybody says now. So I think it's okay. And then, oh gosh, really? So the danger, of course, here is acting out of emotional anger and frustration. How do we slow down? How do we process through anger? How do we ask that famous, why am I feeling this way? Why is this going on in my world? How am I being asked to grow up with that Capricorn polarity to Mars retrograde in Cancer? How am I being asked to mature in my world? Mars makes waxing squares to Chiron, as we've looked at a little bit. And so I've been saying Mars will have to go through the entire emotional spectrum that we have in our life. All right. It's a waxing square. It's the crises in action. Here's Chiron in Mars sign, and that square to Cancer. It is that secure, insecure. Pressure builds up. How do I release? And it can be quite easy to go to anger. So again, are we going to act on that? Or are we going to step back and go, let me think about this before I choose to speak up or act out? We could also kind of go through those rage collapse cycles. Okay. We get angry, but then we don't know what to do about it. So where do we have to stand up for ourselves sometimes in some situations? This is where Chiron in Aries says, I must act. I can't let this person run all over me and continually change the plan after we had already decided on it, and they just think they can change everything and we follow along. I think I'd cancel a plane ticket, other than we have tickets to a football game. Woohoo! Let's see here. Oh no. Okay, so we don't have Mars squaring Chiron while we are going to the football game. But we do have it. Oh gosh, I can't remember what the aspects were going on when we are actually going to a professional football game. Yeah, remember, there's some Mars aspects going on the beginning of January, and I'm like, oh, okay, Kimberly. I've already said I'm just going to be. I've been to one professional football game before where was way, way high up in the stands, and I'll tell you what, I get so scared I can't move. Talk about a fear of heights. So Leroy promised me that our tickets are down close to the field or
We're
in
gonna
the
cuddle, you're cuddled up in
section.
the end zone. You'll be cuddled up in the end zone, honey. It's just fun.
They'll be okay. Sorry, got sidetracked. So, how are we needing to accept responsibility for any situation in our life? How are we needing to change things into healthier and more mature ways? And because Chiron can sometimes be, I've heard other astrologers call it this energetic force in our world. The rainbow bridge between conscious, unconscious, kind of between what's manifested, what's not manifested. So how do we take that energetic part of Chiron and start anew, start afresh, initiate again, help Mars do things different, help Mars make new beginnings? That can be a positive from those waxing squares. Now, I wanted to just kind of bring this in for you. This is a slide from my Great Ingress Decade workshop. And this is where you can see where we have, and I'm doing this generic from 0 to 360, putting Pluto as the slowest moving planet. You can see the Mars oppositions, and you can see that we have coming up this decade Neptune and Uranus, 5 crescent waxing sextiles. We have Uranus making 5 first quarter waxing trines to Pluto. And then we're going to start in with Neptune's waxing sextiles to Pluto again, the last of them, 13 of them. So I'm pointing this out because in addition to these Mars Pluto oppositions, which might be the frustration energy, Mars is going to make nice sextiles to Uranus and nice trines to Neptune. So we do have, again, as I'm saying, a couple of relief valves for Mars. Okay. Here are the sextiles to Uranus, and here's where we want to be working towards that inner emotional security so that we can be creating that deeper self-reliance with Mars in Taurus so that our survival instincts can be blossoming. Here's how we're going to provide for ourselves from that inner energy moving outward into manifesting. Go beyond surviving into our flourishing instincts. How do we align with the evolving values in our world as Uranus is finishing up its transit through Taurus? I'm saying those waxing sextiles, they might be the smoothest aspects that Mars makes with Uranus because it's creative. Waxing sextile, 60 degrees, they're choice points that we are making to create. We're building up energy. And so if these two put their power together, they can create. However, they're in passive polarity signs. So that's also inner energy. It lends to let's think before we act. Let's consider this before we really go forward with it. However, because it's Uranus, you can pay attention to future orientated messages between them. Oh, this is what I want to do. This is how I'm going to take care of my resources. This is how I'm going to participate physically on planet Earth. These are the new ideas coming forth for me that I want to utilize in becoming me and participating. Waxing trines to Neptune. How do we align actions, Mars, with our deepest beliefs, Neptune? And I always say with trines, they're reward aspects if we've made the prior effort. So there could be some nice creative things that might come through or spark for ideas, but what have we been doing to create that? It also is possible that we might really deepen emotional bonds with others through this. How are our deepest desires evolving? Those final months, Neptune and Pisces, what do we have to let go of? Mars retrograde, what desires no longer serve us? So it's almost like we've got a revolving door here with these waxing trines. Neptune and Pisces says release, and Mars retrograde says, what am I going to fill the space up with? Work to be conscious of that as best as you can. Here again, with Mars retrograde in Cancer, there might be some familial situations that show up in pleasant ways, or maybe, some disillusions that come along with the whole family environment in some way. In other words, how are the issues showing up? How do you want to take action with everything? Mars also makes aspects to the nodal axis, waning sextiles, South Node Mars, creative partnerships, power struggles, who dominates who, South Node in Libra, minimize victimization, take on self-responsibility. North Node is waxing trines to Mars. How are we wanting to create new initiatives, new desires, new creativity? North Node Aries, how are we standing up for ourselves? Because this is the nodes of the moon, there's potential, trines and sextiles, for emotional evolution in deep, deep personal ways. Here's Mars stationary direct on February 23rd. So here again, one more time, Mars retrograde evolving the leading edge of our desire nature. Will we do this at the expense of other people? Or will we do it in harmony with others and the planet? As Mars gets ready to go direct February 23rd, Venus is going retrograde March 1st. Venus is already slowed down to its retrograde point. It's going to go retrograde at 10 degrees Aries, 50 minutes. So it's already slowing down. Are those new desires going to manifest? Or because we always have Venus-Mars retrograde cycles tandem, one after the other, sometimes Venus first, sometimes Mars first, but they are always very close in tandem to each other. We've got all this Mars solutions. However, Venus getting ready to go retrograde Aries, back to Pisces. Do we have to still keep processing what's no longer working? Do we have to let go? Do we have that revolving door, letting go here, moving forward there? Stay tuned. We'll see how that kind of works out for us. Okay. Mars gets kind of close to creating a square with Venus. And they're in orb of a T-square with the moon on the day that it goes direct. So I'm sensing that, yes, we move forward with Mars direct, but we've got to do it with a practical maturity moon in Capricorn. Okay. So more things going on. I won't go into a lot of detail on that. Here's all my highlights for, Mars retrograde as we slow down and review how we want to move forward. What desires have I exhausted? How do I let go? How do I slow down and listen inwardly and to others? That's the Libra polarity to Mars naturally ruling Aries. How do I create inner emotional security? What emerging desires are coming into consciousness? How do I find the courage to act on my desires? And, you know, it's not about you, not about me, it's about us. How do we together create the world we wish to see? Here are future Mars retrograde cycles. I always kind of like to just point them out. You can see we're going to do Virgo Leo, then we're going to do Libra Virgo, then we're going to do Scorpio, then we're going to do Capricorn Sag as we go forward over the next few years. And then I'm going to do my annual forecast a little early because of our trip to football game. So December 30th. And then when I get home, we will do the Pisces, Virgo, nodal axis shift and transit. All right, everybody. This is it. Any comments, questions before I let you go? How about my good old medium monk, Leroy?
You did great. That's a lot of research, and we all appreciate it. And I think it's going to be a powerful entry into next year, 2025 for sure. So make sure you tune into that forecast in 2025. That's December 30th, 5 p.m. Same time, same place. And as always, move with joy and passion on this always
Oops,
exciting
I
journey.
didn't realize that I did that. Oh, or somebody else did it.
So are somebody else messing up on our
We haven't figured out.
Hey, I want to look for
Oh
the
yeah, I
graffiti.
agree.
I need to
Huh?
delete the graffiti icon or whatever's going on there.
Okay, so here's what we have to do. Any volunteers? We have to find somebody who knows how to do. We're new to EA Zoom. I can talk on it, but running, we're new. I had to find somebody who knows more about EA Zoom, and we have to practice with him, Leroy. Okay, we're gonna have to make that a little bit of a priority or a lesson, Mars retrograde. Hey, everybody, breathe deep, slow down, pace yourself, count to 10, count to 100, and do your best to be at peace in the world over the next few months. Thank you, everyone.